You're listening to The Nourished Child, episode number 85. Ready, set, go.
Welcome to the Nourished Child podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
So many of us have aspirations for our kids, especially when it comes to sport. I know I do. As I record this interview, and by the time you listen to it, my son will be on his way to the U.S. Rowing National Championships in Sarasota, Florida, to compete against some of the finest rowers in the country. To say I'm proud of him, the boys, and Cox in his lightweight boat and all the hard work it's taken to get to this point is an understatement. If you're a parent of a serious athlete, you know what goes into getting to an elite status. Hours upon hours of training, cooking, feeding, weekends spent traveling to regattas, and the financial expense of supporting the demands of the sport. What my son has gained from rowing goes beyond the physical benefits of being in crazy good shape. I've watched him literally transform from a child into a man, a young man who balances the demands of training, academics, and outside interests while having positive relationships and a family life. This actually is why I'm so excited to introduce my guest to you today. I have Gevvie Stone on the show. Gevvie is originally from Newton, Massachusetts, and is an Olympic rower who competes in the women's single sculls. She completed her undergraduate degree at Princeton University and went to medical school at Tufts University in Boston. She started her emergency medicine residency at Beth Israel in 2017 and is currently on break to train for the 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo. Gevvie earned a silver medal in the women's single sculls at the 2016 Olympic Games and competed in the 2012 Olympic Games in London. This past year, Gevvie won the women's championship singles race at the head of the Charles for the 9th time and the 5th time in a row. Currently, Gevvie is living and she trains in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Gevvie will walk us through her journey as a teenager who had her eyes set on another sport to her experiences and challenges as an Olympian and a doctor. How does she balance the demands of an aggressive training schedule with a commitment to becoming an ER doc? She's going to let us in on that, plus so much more. If you've got an aspiring athlete in any sport, share this episode. I think he or she will be very inspired. But before we get started, I wanted to bring your attention to a few things. If you have an athlete and have never talked about sports nutrition, what to eat and when, don't forget I have a great resource for you. My self-study Eat Like a Champion program was written for and designed for the young athlete. I know teens who play sports need to start taking responsibility for what and when they eat, but it's hard for them to do this without a foundation of knowledge. Athletes get the basics in this program, including energy and protein needs, what to eat before, during, and after training, and how to eat differently for competition days. You can find it on my website at www.jillcastle.com/programs. Eat Like a Champion, my book of the same name, is also available on Amazon. It was written with the parent and the coach in mind, so that's a great resource also. I also interviewed another rower way back when on episode number 40, Dan Walsh. I invite you to take a listen to that one too. It's great to hear the stories of sacrifice and success. It's inspiring for parents and young athletes alike. So what's eating me now? I just recently got back from a presentation to a group of pediatricians on the topic of ARFID, Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder, or what I refer to commonly as extreme picky eating. You know, these patients are really complicated. And what I hear from parents that I work with and from parents who listen to this show or read my blog, is that they hear from healthcare providers to not worry about the picky eating, or they hear that the child will grow out of it. Well, if a child has ARFID, it's unlikely that they're going to grow out of it. And it is unlikely that parents aren't going to be worried about it because it's such a pronounced form of picky eating. It infects the entire family life, basically. So what I talked about with these pediatricians was the need for a solid treatment team for these kids, whether you're an individual practitioner, a pediatrician referring to an individual practitioner, or a group of individual practitioners, or an outpatient treatment facility. These kiddos do best when they get sort of a whole child treatment. So if you're a pediatrician and you listen to this show, I encourage you to find your team. You'll need a dietitian, a registered dietitian who's experienced in pediatric nutrition, preferably. You'll need a speech-language pathologist or an occupational therapist who are both trained in feeding therapy. And you'll also need a mental health provider because the incidence of anxiety disorder, and OCD is quite high in these kids. If you're a dietitian or a feeding therapist, I encourage you to reach out to your local pediatricians and let them know how you can help, how you can be part of their team, particularly for these kids who have extreme picky eating disorder. So for healthcare providers who listen to the show, doctors, speech pathologists, occupational therapists, other dietitians, I'll be opening up a limited number of spots for clinical supervision in the area of weight concerns, so over or underweight, and picky eating or ARFID. I'm still working out the details, but if this is something that interests you, or you're feeling like you need another professional to bounce your cases off of, give me a shout via email, jill@jillcastle.com. Remember, you can find the show notes over at www.jillcastle.com/085. That's 085 for episode number 85. I'll be posting the resources and other things that we mention in the show over there. So let's go ahead and get this show on the road. Here's Gevvie. Hey, Gevvie, welcome to The Nourished Child.
Thank you, Jill. Glad to be here.
I'm excited to talk with you. As I was looking through your history and all the different things that you have done, we have some commonalities, which we'll dive into probably a little bit later. But before we get started with sort of the official interview, I always like to give my guests an opportunity to introduce themselves and talk about what they do.
Okay. It's a kind of hodgepodge of things, but I am both a rower and a doctor. I have competed for the U.S. team in the women's single in 2011 and then the 2012 Olympics, and then again from 2014 and 2016 winning silver in Rio. Kind of alternating with that, I went to med school, graduated from Tufts Med School in 2014, and have done 14 months of emergency medicine residency prior to last August. August 2018 was my last shift. And I am now focusing again on rowing full time, hopefully rowing in Tokyo.
That's amazing. That's so awesome. So, you know, I think I mentioned I have a son who is a rower. So we are very much into the rowing world, spring regattas right now. He's a junior in high school and a lightweight rower. And so my question for you is, when did you actually get started in rowing?
I was one of a few who kind of grew up knowing what rowing was, more about it than most people do. My parents actually both met in 1977 at the World Championships. They were both members of the U.S. team that summer, and again in 78 and 79. So I grew up in this tiny little niche world of rowing. That being said, I didn't want to do what my parents did and didn't want to row. So I did row, if you can call it that, at the summer camp I went to. As an introductory thing, I probably gotten about 4 times when I was 15, but then took it up earnestly my sophomore fall at Windsor, my high school, where rowing was a sport that was offered. And I realized that soccer was just not meant for me. So I should give rowing a shot. And then my junior year or my sophomore spring, I told myself that if I made varsity lacrosse, I'd play lacrosse the rest of high school. And if I didn't, that I'd switch to rowing my junior year. I didn't make varsity lacrosse, and it's probably the best bad news that's ever happened to me. And from there, it's been history, and I've been kind of rowing ever since.
Yeah, and you're obviously very talented at it, being an Olympic rower and a U.S. national team rower. What keeps you going? Like, what keeps you loving rowing? Because it's a lot of hard work.
It is a lot of hard work. It requires definitely, I'd say, stubborn mindset. If you want to be more complimentary to yourself, you could say it requires perseverance, but it's the same motion over and over again. And it does take a certain personality to focus on that repetitive motion with a determination and effort, every stroke, every practice, every day. But there are a number of things about rowing, to be honest, but a few of the big ones are I've found the more effort I put in, then the more speed I get out. And there aren't a ton of things in life that are that linear, where the harder you work, the faster you get. And it's pretty special to see hard work really come across as results. I also love the feeling of being on the water. I think especially being in a small boat, especially the single, there's something where rowing seems as close as one can get to flying in a way. A lot more effort possibly than the birds, but it's a unique sensation gliding above the water like that. And it's always challenging. And I think I've been a person who looks forward to a challenge. And despite the fact that I've been getting faster, there's always speed left to gain. It's kind of this infinitesimal goal to kind of chase that speed down. And I've found that I'm relatively addicted to the challenge.
Do you have sort of speed goals and timelines related to that? Because you are officially training, right, for the Olympics. So I'm curious, do you map out a strategy for your training and where you want to be in terms of speed by a certain time frame? How does that all look?
The numbers are hard to track, especially on the water, due to current weather, training in different places, which is very different water temperatures and this and that. I do have a training plan day to day and month to month, which builds around the regattas. Most recently, we had trials almost 2 weeks ago, and kind of most of the last 8 months has kind of been looking forward to that trials regatta. And prepping for it. And then along the way, there are definitely checkpoints on the erg, the rowing machine that people see at the gyms and at CrossFit. It's much easier to track your numbers and your speed. So knowing what I've pulled in the past and then trying to aim for personal records at set distances. The standard ones for the senior national team are a 30-minute test at 22 strokes per minute, and then a 2K test, and then a 6K test. So kind of hitting benchmarks along the way in training. It kind of helps clarify that your fitness is there. That being said, if your fitness is there, it also takes rowing well on the water. And the mental aspects, there are a lot of different elements involved. And kind of just going out there and practice every day and working as hard as I can.
Yeah. So you do practice every single day of the week, or do you have rest days?
Sunday is yoga day.
Okay.
Which feels like a rest day. And other days, it's either 2 or 3 sessions per day.
Wow.
On the days where it's 3, there's always one of the 3 is a weightlifting session.
Okay.
But it ends up being 16 workouts a week if you count the yoga.
Wow. So as a registered dietitian, I work with children. I've written a book on sports nutrition. And so I can't help but wonder, what does your diet look like?
A little bit of everything, I think, is a good way to put it. I did actually undergo some changes. I worked with a sports dietitian in the lead up to Rio, who was very helpful. And at that point, I hadn't eaten red meat for 15 years. I think I gave it up because of the impact on the environment and didn't miss it, so didn't go back to it, but was deficient in a number of things there, in addition to some of the omega-3s, and there's just a list of things that I could change with my diet. So I've been more careful, I think, in the last 3 years to consume enough protein. That's kind of the biggest obstacle for me. I don't gravitate towards meat naturally, so making sure that I get enough grams of protein in every day, kind of aiming for that 1.5 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight.
Mm-hmm. And do you? I'm sorry. Do you use things like milk to help you meet your protein needs?
I use dairy a lot to meet my protein needs. So milk, yogurt, those are kind of the two big ones. I love all dairy, but milk and Greek yogurt are definitely, I think, the most efficient ways to get the protein, and the healthy ways. And I mean, the first thing I do when I get off the water, basically for morning practice, is I always have a frozen berry and Greek yogurt and granola in a Tupperware that I bring with me to the boathouse and kind of get in the calories right after to get good refueling in.
Mm-hmm. And when you look back on, you said 5 years ago, your diet was dramatically different than what it is now. Have you seen improvements related to changing your diet in your training and in your performance?
I definitely, my strength, lifting in the weight room has definitely gotten stronger, and I think I look stronger. I was down in Charlottesville, Virginia, training with the under 23 coach that I had in 2006. And he said, "Man, you look strong," which was a nice compliment to hear. So I think that consuming more protein and more red meat definitely has something to do with that. I also think that consuming the more protein and red meat has enabled me. I had no measurable testosterone when I got measured in 2016. And this year we had labs, and there was a number there, not a big 0, which was really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a very high number, but hey, it was a number.
Yeah, I don't even think about that. But do you look at those hormones in terms of your ability to perform?
I don't rely on them, but there are extremes that are bad. So having no testosterone definitely was a sign that I could be stronger and could be getting more out of myself. Because in order to be rowing is a mix of endurance and strength. And given that strength component and given the heavy lifting that I do 3 days a week, I should have some testosterone as a component of my hormonal makeup. And I just had none. So what it is, I think matters less than the fact that it's there. You don't want to be in either extreme.
Right. And some parents that are listening out there might think, well, girls aren't supposed to have testosterone in their bodies.
Yeah. And in fact, my OBGYN was like, a lot of my patients don't. I was like, yeah, but a lot of your patients don't do like heavy strength and cleans and front squats and all this stuff 3 days a week. It's absolutely normal for girls. 0 is typically within the range of normal. However, if you are trying to compete at the elite level, and if you are doing a decent amount of strength work, there should be some measurable testosterone. And there's a wide range of what's within, quote, normal for females. And it's actually come up in the news recently with castrosomania, but that's kind of the other extreme of the spectrum.
Oh, too high?
She's hyperandrogynous, yeah.
Wow. And so what does that mean? A lot of testosterone in your body and
a lot of testosterone. And so it was before the International Arbitration for Sport. And I won't get into the details because it gets kind of complicated, but I was on the other end of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad I'm not on the extreme anymore.
Yeah, you're registered now, right? you have a little bit of testosterone.
Yeah, now I'm like somewhere on the lower end of the normal, but yeah.
Okay. And so this actually probably means a lot to you because you also are in a residency. You're taking a temporary break from your medical residency, but gosh, I mean, what a marriage between rowing is such a physically demanding sport and medicine. So when did you decide to become a doctor and how did that whole process unfold?
I don't even remember, I guess, the moment when my mom would say I decided to become a doctor. I had recurrent knee problems in middle school and went to visit an orthopedist. And I walked out of the clinic and turned to my mom and said, "That's what I want to do when I grow up." And fast forward, that was 7th grade, I believe. Fast forward to high school, I did definitely have a love of the sciences and also a love of the humanities. And I think a subconscious knowledge that I needed to interact with people as part of what I did in life. I'm definitely on the extrovert side of things. And for Take a Senior to Work Day, I signed up for I'll Shadow a Doctor, which our school coordinates with alumni of the high school. And I was assigned to an OBGYN, and I was a very self-conscious, shy, prude girl at this all-girls school, and I was horrified about going to the OBGYN office for a day and seeing all these patients. Fortunately, it was an obstetrics day, not a gynecology day, and most of what we did was look for fetal heartbeats in the uterus with a Doppler, which was great.
Yeah.
And I remember leaving saying, wow, if I can find that interesting, then like I really do want to be a doctor, because that's got to be as bad as it gets.
Yeah.
So I was pre-med when I entered college and thought I'd major in the sciences. And actually, my dad, who's a big Civil War buff, said, you have to take this course with a history professor. He's retiring and he's the guy in the whole country. I'm paying your tuition. You just got to do it. So I took Civil War history and loved it and ended up majoring in U.S. history while fulfilling all the pre-med requirements.
Really?
In college, yeah.
That's so interesting because
So
you really
I've been a woman of balancing opposites for a while.
Wow, yeah, because that's unusual. When you think of pre-med, you think of all the classic not arts and sciences, but the science core classes. You don't think history major.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the med school in terms of what they look for in their applicants. I think at Tufts, I'd say my guess would be roughly 30% of our medical school class majored in a non-hard science. And I believe that psychology is actually included in the more liberal side of things, which it could go either way in terms of what you focus on when you're studying psychology. But yeah, it was a pretty decent number that try to balance it in college. I mean, it's a liberal arts education, so you get to do your problem sets and write your papers. It's kind of use both hemispheres of your brain and meet a lot of different people and get exposed to a lot of different ideas.
Yeah. So in my early part of my career, I worked in Boston. I did my internship at Mass General and worked there for a few years. And then I switched over to Children's Hospital and worked there for a few years. And so I know that the most successful doctors were the doctors who were very relatable and personable and who really were able to connect with their patients. And, obviously there's an art to doing that very quickly because you have just such a finite amount of time when you're with each patient. So it's actually, I think, I would personally think that it would be a good thing to have that balance of the humanities and the science, because you sort of work all of that, being human into a job that can turn out to be very disconnected with the client if you're not careful.
I 100% agree. And Tufts as a med school really emphasized that principle. And I remember the first day of orientation, they said to us, we've admitted you because you're interesting people. We want you to leave medical school interesting people.
Yeah.
We don't want this to be all of you. And I think my choosing emergency medicine has also been a huge part of that, because emergency medicine docs tend to have other interests. And I don't know whether it's chicken or the egg, which comes first, that people with interest tend to go into emergency, or people with emergency have time for other interests. It is shift work. And so I think it's somewhat more manageable to balance other interests because you can anticipate your schedule a bit more. But it's definitely been really fun being around people that have a wide variety of things they like to do in addition to loving medicine.
Mm-hmm. And emergency is quite, I would think, an adrenaline kick. I mean, you don't know what you're getting. Mm-hmm. Some of the stuff that you get can be pretty intense.
Yep.
How did you choose emergency medicine? And then how do you balance rowing and, going through your residency?
So I chose it, one, because the people that I met in emergency were people that I got along with. And I think some of that is the interest in having a life outside medicine. I do love that you don't know what's going to come in the door. It makes every shift go by pretty darn quickly when you're always being surprised and there's always something to do, always patients to see. I love the adrenaline. Obviously, that's kind of natural for an athlete to thrive off of a stressful situation. And it's also a very teamwork oriented part of the hospital. We are very interdependent with each other in terms of overlapping shifts and sign out, but also, and really importantly, with the nurses and the techs and every other person who works within the department. And I think being on a team with rowing for so long, I enjoy that environment. And I think it's just makes work a much more fun place to be. As far as fitting the rowing in, to different levels during the year. When I was in the department, it was actually some of the easiest time to fit in rowing because we work 8 to 9 hour shifts, which end up being 9 to 10 once you've signed out and written notes and things, but it still allows a good 2-hour chunk of the day that I would spend going to the boathouse. And sometimes it was right after a night shift. So I'd get off around 8 a.m. and go rowing after having worked all night. And on a more natural note, after I worked like a 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., I could go rowing at 4 p.m., which is much easier for the body clock. But there were always hours in the day to fit one workout in. And then I couldn't train full time. And that's when I knew, which did take some time, that I wanted to go for Tokyo. I also knew that part of that would be taking a leave of absence and focusing on rowing full time.
Mm-hmm. And did you find that rowing after your shift was sort of a stress reliever for you?
I think, yeah, definitely. I think sometimes as exhausted as I was, getting the heart rate up in a controlled way, I think being outside has a huge element of it. Seeing the sun and just getting some fresh air. And as I said earlier, one of the reasons I love rowing is it's so controllable. And I love the uncontrollable aspect of the emergency department, but the balance between the two is certainly quite nice.
The opposites.
Yeah.
This episode of The Nourished Child is brought to you by New England Dairy and Food Council. As a mom and nutrition professional, I love so many things about milk. It's a simple way to get high-quality protein plus other key nutrients kids need to help power through the day's activities. I was raised on milk, and my 4 kids have been raised on it too. New England Dairy and Food Council is a nonprofit nutrition education organization staffed by dietitians that are dedicated to providing the public with evidence-based dairy nutrition information, on-the-farm experiences, youth wellness opportunities, and more. Follow them on social media at New England Dairy or visit www.newenglanddairycouncil.org to learn more. You have been in partnership with New England Dairy and Food Council through Team Milk. So let's talk about milk for a little bit. Did you grow up drinking milk?
I did. My uncle was actually a dairy farmer in southeastern Massachusetts. He had a small herd. I would lie if I say I knew what the number of cows he had, but my guess would be around 60. And he was a dairy farmer until I was roughly in kindergarten or first grade. But I do remember whenever we would go down on weekends, because we spend the weekends in the town that he lives in, and we'd stop by and pick up the milk. And it was pasteurized but not homogenized. It had the cream on top, which my dad loved. And that's what we would use. It came in a wide range of glass bottles. And when we were at home in Newton, which is just outside Boston, we had Crescent Ridge, which was also glass bottle delivery. And so once a week, the milkman came and dropped off the milk, and we got probably at least 2 gallons of milk a week. I think when my brother started to be old enough to eat a lot, as teenage boys do, we went to double deliveries a week because we were just consuming too much milk for it to fit in the milk box. 1 delivery a week. And I grew up eating cold cereal with milk at breakfast and then drinking a glass of milk with dinner. And if we couldn't sleep, my parents would warm up milk in the microwave and put in a tablespoon of maple syrup.
That's very New England.
It's very New England. It works, though. It does. It puts you right to sleep.
That's so funny. My husband is from New Hampshire, and he likes maple syrup on his vanilla ice cream.
It sounds delicious to me.
Yeah. So what would you say to skeptics who don't believe that milk is an important part of an athlete diet?
Gosh. So from the medicine side of things, I do think it is person dependent. I think I am of European ancestry, and we've been drinking milk for millennia. And most people of European descent don't have any issues drinking cow's milk. It's just evolutionarily, it's become a part of our diet. We are able to digest it, and it has become an important source of protein, in addition to calcium. I think dairy is the only effective way, aside from supplements, to consume calcium, especially when kids are growing. And for women and men, that's up to 22. I think I try to emphasize when I talk to juniors, you drink milk because your parents tell you to when you're 10. But a lot of people stop when they get their own opinions about wanting to do their own thing. And having dairy, as far as calcium and strong bones go, is actually very critical until you've graduated from college, because that's when your bones are really doing the most development, is in those late pubertal years. And we had the milk machine in college, and I continued to drink milk at dinner through college because I like milk. But I do think that dairy is the way to get calcium, and it is critical for bone development through those early 20 years. And after that, it's a fabulous way to get protein. I think, especially looking at, if you compare it to some of the substitutes out there, if you look at the nutrition facts, yes, it's a white semi-sweet beverage, but if you look at the nutrition facts, the discrepancies become very obvious in that milk is a very good source of protein from a cow, and probably from a goat and other animals, but I don't actually know enough to comment on that. And harder to obtain and probably more expensive. But cow's milk is a fabulous source of protein. And for me especially, it tastes good. I find it more convenient. And as someone who's trying to get the most out of my strength, and as an athlete, there's not much that can substitute well or effectively. I think there was some article that came out about chocolate milk being up there as one of the top recovery drinks, if you could make an ideal recovery drink. And I mean, it's milk with a little bit of sugar, which is great.
It's your milk with maple syrup, white milk with maple syrup. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it has it's a very balanced, effective energy and recovery drink. It's got protein. It's got good carbohydrates, natural carbohydrates, not from added sugar, in the white milk at least. And I drink 1% milk, or eat 2% yogurt. So a bit of fat as well.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you what type of milk you drink. My son, also a rower, I had 4 children within 5 years. We had the milk delivery guy in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts also. And at one point we were getting 5 gallons of milk per week delivered. 4 young kids.
Yeah, I think up to 4.
Yeah, a lot of milk was drunk in my house, and whole milk. My youngest is 17, and so 17 years ago, the recommendations were whole milk for the first 5 years. I've kind of kept with whole milk all along. We've dibbled and dabbled in 2% and 1%, but then when my son hit his teenage years, we switched back to whole milk because he's a natural lightweight in that he has a hard time keeping his weight on. And so the whole milk really helps, it helps him. Everything does, but it's a whole totality of the diet. But the whole milk really, it's filling, it's delicious, and he drinks quite a bit of it. But I was wondering for you, is it easy for you to keep your weight in the range where you want it to be?
Yeah, my weight really doesn't fluctuate much. It hasn't since my senior year of college. I kind of stick within a 5-pound range.
Okay.
And it changes a little bit seasonally, but other than that, it's pretty stationary. And for me, I'll drink 1% or 2%. I think they're pretty similar, to be totally honest. But the skim for me, it's a texture thing. It doesn't have enough flavor. It's not creamy enough. And again, it's a texture thing, and it just my cereal doesn't absorb it the right way.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I settle in the middle.
That's good. And that, a lot of times parents don't realize that fat in the milk helps the vitamin D be better absorbed as well, which is a nice thing.
And also, crucial. One of the reasons milk is great in terms of helping people know when they're full as well. And I mean, a little bit of fat in everything is very important for flavor and knowing when you're full and not consuming too much sugar. I think a lot of products, especially on the yogurt side of things, I've noticed the non-fats have more sugar added in order to make them taste good. But the fat, I believe, I mean, it naturally is in it, and it's a more balanced way, I think, to get a good flavor.
Yeah. Well, and fat is filling, so is protein.
And fats, yeah. And if you need fat.
Yes, you do. Yes.
Not all fat. You don't want a 100% fat diet, but you need some fat. My ice cream helps with that too.
There you go.
My ice cream consumption is a pretty healthy amount.
As you enter your third year of the Team Milk partnership, what impact do you think this program has had on your life, both personally or even professionally?
You know, personally, it's funny. One of the ways is they gave us, as part of it, that we have gear that says Team Milk. And one of them is a vest, a down vest that I think is really comfortable and have found myself wearing frequently. And I get a lot of questions and comments from friends about, you drink milk or you like milk? And drinking milk has come up in conversation many more times in the last 2 years than it ever had before. And I do love milk, and I've always loved milk, and it gives me an opportunity to talk about that, which is pretty cool. So it's become, I think, more a part of my identity because I get asked about it more and get an opportunity to talk about it more.
Well, certainly if it's a natural fit, if it's something that's already in your life anyways.
Right. Oh yeah. It was absolutely an easy yes to agree to a partnership with something that I fully believe in and already use. As part of the partnership, I have free milk for a year with every year of the partnership, which is fabulous because I'm now not paying for something that I would buy anyway. So I definitely, personally, I would never partner with a brand or entity that I didn't fully believe in. And so milk was a perfect thing to come along at the time it did.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Let's talk about role models. I had Dan Walsh on the show, and he also an Olympian, former Olympian rower, and happens to be the coach of my son's crew team. And so, you know, he's a spectacular role model. He lives and breathes rowing. Obviously, he's coaching young rowers, but he's this, I think do you know Dan? You probably do.
From
yeah, national.
Gevvie overlapped in 2008.
Okay.
And maybe 2012. I don't remember whether he tried for the team in 12.
Okay.
I think he may have.
So he's this huge guy, you know, like 6, I don't know, you might know his stats. I don't know his stats. 6'4", 6'5".
Oh, taller than that, I would say 6'6" at least.
Yeah, he's a big guy. And quite a role model, a very positive role model, I find, for my son and the other rowers that he's in contact with. And now I feel so privileged to speak with you because you're a female role model in the world of rowing. What does that feel like to be a role model for young rowers, young women, potential future doctors? You've got this combination of, you know, being an elite athlete, a doctor. People look up to you. What does that feel like?
It's a bit overwhelming when I think about it. When I got into rowing and began rowing at the elite level, it was absolutely for, the love of the sport and the internal challenge. When I started to go into medicine as well, I noticed that during my time off, during my first break, it crossed my mind relatively frequently that my friends were becoming doctors and helping people, and I was focusing on when my next nap would be and what I would eat and what the practice was. And it felt very selfish. And making the team and being successful has allowed me to do more as far as outwardly trying to engage as a role model in terms of speaking engagements with schools. And I work with the Positive Coaching Alliance as well, the New England chapter. And when I made the decision, was thinking about trying for Tokyo, I again thought, I could be helping people. I could be in the hospital, really like hands-on every day. And fortunately have a number of people in my life that said, you're helping people with your rowing as well, because these girls look up to you. And every now and then I get an email or a letter or a comment or this or that that reminds me of that aspect of my life, because it's not something, I'm just kind of being me. And I definitely am not easy on myself. I expect a lot from myself. I set my goals high and I work hard to attain them. But those reminders from girls that I'm helping positively impact their lives is huge, and just such wonderful positive reinforcement, and makes me love what I'm doing just that much more. It is the reason, I mean, because I've able to have that impact, it's one of the reasons that I wanted to do Tokyo again. I think it's a privilege to have an impact in girls' lives, and some girls that I've never even met. And I definitely, it's a little bit stressful if you think about it that way, but also really just a big honor. And I guess I try to think, I was a camp counselor for 3 years. And one of the things we always talk about is trying to lead by example. And that's what I'm trying to do, is be a positive role model and do my best. And hopefully that influences girls to do their best and to stay engaged. I think do my best through the world of being a student athlete. I think that is very empowering for women and men in general. I think if you focus on the principles of being a student athlete and the importance of both of the elements, both school and sport, I think it helps to become a balanced, strong person.
What would you say to kids who aspire to be just like you?
If I'm just writing it on, we have these playing cards from US Rowing or baseball cards that they give us. If I have to summarize it in a few words, I say aim high and have fun. I think those are kind of the most crucial elements of everything that I've done, is set your goals high. Obviously, that means a lot of hard work cut out for you, but hard work can be very enjoyable, and have fun along the way, because if you don't love what you're doing, it's not going to work out and you're not going to give your best towards it. It's much easier to do well at something you love. And so finding those passions and really putting yourself into them.
Yeah. So when you say aim high, when you think of goals, do you aim for probable goals, possible goals, or inevitable goals?
It's a mix of all the above. I think I didn't acknowledge that the Olympics were a goal of mine until my freshman year of college, which was still even, that would have been the fall of 2003, 8 years before I even made the Olympic team. And a few of my teammates were talking about their goals of being an Olympian. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's going to be really hard to make the Olympics. And that's when it crossed my mind, wait, that's a goal of mine to make the Olympics? And so obviously that was a very long-term, huge goal, and something, after getting cut from the team in 2008, something I didn't think was possible, but was still in the back of my head. I got cut from the team in 2008 and came home and was starting med school in the fall, and told my parents, I've had a great rowing career. I'm not cut out to be an Olympian. I'm just not that good. And I'm starting med school and I'm going to be a doctor. And I'm okay with that. And my dad said, well, yeah, but you do better as a student when you exercise and you have this single, so you should probably go out occasionally. And so I started running the single for fun and all these small fall head races in the New England area, and kind of built back my goals from there. It's always ups and downs. And so you have the big goals, like going to the Olympics, and the smaller goals day by day. I mean, the goals to set a personal best in an erg test, which is actually not a small goal, or the smaller goals of trying to think every stroke of the workout about making a technical change, or trying to go underneath a certain pace for one piece of a workout, or trying to hit this rating. I mean, they're really small goals, and then the big ones, and then there's a variety in between. And I think aspiring towards any of that number, but you definitely can't hit the big ones without the small ones.
Yeah.
It's good to have the big ones as a reminder, but you need the small ones to make the big ones realistic.
And to keep you motivated.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to moms, coaches, teachers out there that are influencing young athletes?
Gosh, I think athletics is important. I've encountered too many adults who want school to come before sports to the extent that sports get forgotten. And I think that sports are critical for a ton of reasons, teamwork being a huge one, but also goal setting, persistence, leadership skills. And a huge one that I think we forget in our culture is the ability to take feedback, which negative feedback can be frowned upon, I think, in the academic environment now. I know I didn't get grades until high school. We got check plus and check minus because they didn't want to give us bad grades. And I think sports has been an acceptable place for people to give both positive and negative feedback. And I think learning how to take negative feedback at a young age is really important because when you graduate from college, you're going to get negative feedback in your work and in your life. And I think learning how to take feedback of all sorts through sport is a very invaluable lesson that sometimes gets forgotten. So I would say encourage kids to participate in sports, even if they're not going to be a pro player or an elite player. I think sports teaches you lessons even at any level of ability. I think encouraging participation is huge and sets you up for success in life. And I think a huge part of that as well is playing for love of the game, not playing for your wins and your loss record, but playing for those personal achievements. Like, did you have your best game? Not did you win the game? And I think those are two very different ways of looking at youth sports. And it's one of the things the Positive Coaching Alliance is great about, is really focusing on being a good teammate and getting the most out of yourself and expecting your best, not emphasizing the scoreboard. And I think that's huge. Did you play at your best is kind of the question to ask.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a really good one. Gevvie, what does it mean to you to be nourished?
Oh, gosh.
Surprise question.
To be happy. Yeah. To be happy and have energy. And I think food is very important to me. And when I'm nourished, I'm a happier person all around, emotionally, mentally, physically.
Well, we will all be rooting for you as you
Thank you.
Continue on this journey to the Olympics. We wish you all the best, and let us know how we can follow along with your rowing career and all your races and everything.
Oh, thanks. I'm on both Instagram and Twitter as my handle is Gevvies, Gevgevs.
Okay.
That's the easiest way to do it.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, best of luck to you.
Thank you very much, Jill.
You are so welcome. Thank you.
Take care and good luck to your sons in the season.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much. Well, there you have it. I thought there were some really interesting points Gevvie made about tweaking her body weight and body composition, as well as her diet, to become an even better athlete. I always say to my athletes that I work with, I don't know of a professional athlete out there that doesn't get nutrition counseling, that doesn't know what to eat and when to eat. It's such an important piece of being a higher level athlete. So we know that becoming an elite athlete involves hard work, dedication, and a food plan that works for your body and your sport. And I know as a parent, it can feel like a drain to shell out the money, time, and effort to support your young athlete's development. But as you can see, based on what we learned from Gevvie, this is what it takes to excel in sport. What you don't have an influence over is your child's natural talent, his drive, or his mindset. That is something he or she owns, and it has to be present to get to that next level. So if this episode resonated with you, let me know by posting a comment over at jillcastle.com @TNC_085 or post your comments on my Facebook page, The Nourished Child. Let me know if your athlete listened in and what he or she thought of it as well. Remember, The Nourished Child is a free nutrition and feeding education resource designed to help parents and practitioners. Subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or on one of your favorite Android apps so you can hear every new episode as it releases. And share it with your friends, your family, and your patients. Stay tuned for my next episode, The Science of Emotions and Eating with Melanie Smith. We're digging deep to understand emotions and how they may influence your child's eating habits. This episode is a gem. I hope you will join in. But for today, thanks for joining me. Cheers to having a great week, the start of the summer here. Be sure to give your young athlete a loving squeeze today. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child Podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.